Good to be together again this evening, and again, very grateful and thankful for the invitation to come and be a part of your series, having different speakers touching on so many great topics regarding the family. Really appreciate not only the opportunity to participate in the series, but just the opportunity to be with you is a thrill and a treat and an honor. And we thank you very, very much for letting us be with you all. It's always just like a family reunion, so it's kind of fitting the topic, talk about families, as we are so blessed to have you all as our brothers and sisters in Christ, and to be able to share our faith together, to continue strengthening that bond is always a blessing that we truly appreciate and are grateful for. And we thank you for all the expressions of love and kindness that have been so helpful and meaningful to us. And we just wish to express the same to you all. We just love you all very, very much, and continue to hold you all in our hearts and our thoughts, and for the wonderful work that you all do, and continuing to spread that blessing in your relationship with one another as you continue to be inviting and so kind and bringing other people to the gospel, that they might be a part of this growing family. So we're very thankful for that. This evening, begin our thoughts thinking of that tragic disaster and accident of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. I remember I was in the car, and I'm sure many people, others may be in the same place maybe, or maybe getting ready for the day. It was pretty early in the morning, if I remember. I was just trying to find a station on the radio, and was listening to a little bit of the news, and they spoke about that. I remember I just kind of gasped when I heard it. That's just such a frightening thought. You're on what seems to be a very reliable structure, bridges. You're on a place that you feel very safe, and you've come to expect. I'm sure these people have been up and down and back and forth many, many times before. And this time, all of a sudden, the whole thing starts coming down. And I know we've been following a little bit. I don't know if any updates. They are still looking for some, I believe. Have they found those that they're still retrieving, or they're actually still looking for if there are any survivors, or if they can locate even the bodies of those who tragically maybe have died. But a cargo ship was going through the area and just plowed right into that section. Something else I found as I was following up on it, they said that the repair is going to be very, very complicated, very, very intricate. They said divers are already going down into the area, because what they have to do is they have to cut off certain sections that they can only lift so much at a certain time because of the weight, the massive weight. And they're also trying to retrieve also a number of these items that were being transported and try to see what they can salvage. And they said the divers actually are very overwhelmed, to say the least, because they said because of how murky the water is down there, because of all the debris, they can only literally see about 2 feet in front of them to make an assessment of where they're going to cut, how much can they lift, and how much needs to be removed. So a lot of work is being done, and our prayers continue to go out to all those who were affected by that. And in light of that, I've been thinking just about the idea of reliable structures, reliable ways that we bridge the gap, and we depend upon these structures. And began thinking, as tragic as this is, as it happened so suddenly and so quickly and unexpectedly, I want to talk about a few bridges in our family structure that sometimes are susceptible to being damaged or being completely taken out, that makes being a family very, very difficult. We talked a little bit about certainly the blessing of being a family, of the forgiveness that God teaches us that we can learn to extend and receive from another. That's a wonderful blessing. We talked about the challenges of being the family of God and the inevitable conflicts that brings to our immediate blood-related family, unfortunately sometimes is the case. And tonight I want to focus on what are some of the danger areas that maybe we can be watching out for, to examine our own structures in our families. How secure are they? Are they under attack? Are they not as sturdy as what they ought to be? And are they maybe even susceptible to completely crashing and tumbling down? And those three areas we want to look at is the bridge of communication. Communication, as many of us recognize, and certainly it comes very quickly in establishing having a relationship. Communication is so vital to keeping our relationships intact. Whether it's a husband and a wife, being able to communicate effectively to one another. Whether it's children, being able to communicate to our parents. And a variety of different things seem to always be threatening that sturdy structure. And if that structure becomes damaged, if that structure comes down, it does threaten the whole structure of the family. It's amazing how sometimes it happens very slowly, not suddenly. Sometimes maybe sudden things, abrupt communication, but it seems like a lot of times it's very subtle. We almost don't even realize it's happening. It can be something as simple as two individuals, a husband and a wife, growing family, busy schedule, all kinds of deadlines need to be met. The husband has his, the wife has hers, the children have their schedule, and all it takes is really many times a busy week. A busy week turns into a busy several weeks, and that several weeks turns into a busy month. And all of a sudden, without any intention, we're just not communicating. Those moments of maybe expressing some moment of tender affection, a statement here or there. Oh, you look wonderful tonight. Oh, thank you for thinking of me today. Thank you for packing my lunch. Or thank you for that sweet gesture you thought of me the other day, and I was so encouraged. Sometimes we get so busy, right? All of a sudden, there's no time for that. And then all of a sudden, our communication gets whittled down to just what's needed. Where are you going to be at 9:30? I got this going on at 5:30. Okay, meet you at 8:30. And then we just split. We just take off, and there we go. And then what happens is that status or that system becomes status quo. All of a sudden, no time, not even for tender moments of affection or concern or loving kindness, but just what needs done. And then before we know it, another bridge becomes damaged. Bridge of dependency. Bridge of unity. The bridge of feeling connected in any sense at all. And all of a sudden, that innocent sense and that just busyness and distraction, and we're just meeting the immediate needs and demands of just how to keep the household running. And then all of a sudden, that sense of togetherness, that sense of feeling I'm dependent on this person and this person is dependent on me, and together we form this beautiful bond. And all of a sudden you just feel like you're an individual, two people just running and going through the same doors, opening and closing the same garage, transferring and utilizing the same vehicles, eating out of the same utensils and bowls, but not together. We're not talking, we're not speaking. And all of a sudden we begin to feel we're isolated and we're just surviving. And then the next bridge starts to crumble, and it is this bridge of understanding. We don't even know where each other is at. I don't understand why the person that I am building a life with is irritable. I don't understand it. I haven't been able to have time to check and talk and understand, but I just know there's something bothering, and it's making it a little bit difficult, and then we just have an individual way of dealing with it and just trying to get through that, and we don't want to abrupt anything else because I only have time for so much because I have to get as much sleep as I can because the next day is calling me and the alarm clock has to go off. And so all of a sudden this bridge of even understanding each other starts crumbling, and we're just so isolated and independent, and we're just existing. And what's odd is it seems like when those bridges start individually and intercollectively start coming down, you know what it does feel like? It feels like out of nowhere in the middle of the night, doesn't it feel like a cargo ship just, where did that thing come from? It just knocked and separated the structure holding us together. It happens so frequently, so easily sometimes. And so I want to focus this evening on, if that resonates, if that's something that we can have happened in the past. Maybe we're on the cusp of it happening again. It seems like sometimes we go through cycles, right, where bridges are being built and bridges are coming down, and we're repairing, we're restoring. Wherever we are here in that mode, I want to talk tonight about how we can try to restore it, or perhaps repair it and mend it, so that we can keep it as sturdy as possible. We need the bridge of communication. That is vital. We need the bridge of dependency. And we need the bridge of understanding. There was another bridge in the disciples' life that was beginning to crumble and come down, and it was affecting them. And I want to see just how quickly things began to deteriorate. And we're going to look at some things at how Jesus began to try to bring some restoration, and see how we might learn from how Jesus dealt with the crumbling infrastructure of what was in his own unit of disciples. It was happening. It was happening right in front of his eyes. Communication, understanding, dependency, they were all starting to give way. And they became fractured. And they became individualistic. And they became feeling undependent on each other. And they became isolated and at odds. And even arguing and bickering amongst each other. Turn over to the Gospel of Mark, and we see this bridge and some of the consequences that were happening. And it started really essentially with, and I'm sure many times these things happened, that the disciples have been doing quite a bit of preaching. They were busy. Remember, many times Jesus sent them on missions, and they were required missions, and often would send them out into pairs of twos. And even though they were working together, they all certainly had individual work. They were weighing on them, but the more they began doing this, and the more they began examining themselves, they start kind of becoming distant. They start splintering and separating, and Jesus is left with the work of, how do I fix this? How do I assess this? How do I address this before it becomes too late and the whole thing comes down? But turn over to the Gospel of Mark chapter 10. In Mark chapter 10, it says in verse 32, they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking on ahead of them, and they were amazed, and those who followed were fearful. And again, he took the 12 aside and began to tell them what was going to happen to him, saying, behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and the scribes. And they will condemn him to death, and will hand him over to the Gentiles. They will mock him and spit on him and scourge him and kill him. And 3 days later he will rise again. And in verse 35, it says, James and John, the two sons of Zebedee, came up to Jesus, saying, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. And here we see the bridge of dependency has started to crumble. And rather than feeling a need of a collective unit of each one is equally important, and we depend upon others to help us, and we depend upon what we provide, now they're getting individualistic. And James and John become opportunistic. How can they separate themselves and uniquely put themselves in a place that they no longer need the others? And notice it says, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. And he said to them, what do you want me to do for you? They said to him, grant that we may sit one on your right and one on your left in your glory. But Jesus said to them, you do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized? They said to him, we are able. And Jesus said to them, the cup that I drink, you shall drink, and you shall be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized. But to sit on my right or on my left, this is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared. And notice verse 41. Here's the state of the disciples that they are in at this moment. Hearing this, the 10 began to feel indignant with James and John. And there is discord. They misunderstand each other. They don't understand each other. There is no sense of unity. And they're angry. In verse 42, calling them to himself, Jesus said to them, you know that those who are recognized as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. But it is not this way among you. But whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you shall be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. And you know what Jesus continually finds as they continue to make their way towards Jerusalem is that this is not resonating. It's like they're there, but they're not there. I want to look at what Jesus does in John chapter 13. That I believe gives us some inclination, some clue as to what is it. Is there anything we can do when we feel like we're at the same place? It sounds like sometimes even in a family. And that's what they were. They were a family. They were a family of 12 apostles and their leader, their teacher, their disciple. And amongst other disciples that had joined in their group to follow and be taught the gospel, there's disconnect. Bridges are collapsing all around Jesus. There is a lack of communication. And when there is communication, it's harsh, it's terse, it's accusing of nature, it's suspicious. They don't understand each other. They're not listening to one another, and they're certainly not wanting to depend upon each other. And in the middle of this, we find Jesus in John chapter 13. And he resorts to a language that they all could recognize. And he initiates a love language. When communication is broken, it's sometimes hard to know what to say. What do you say when everything has been said and still no one seems to want to listen? Jesus is like a broken record at this point. He said this over and over and over again. You are not to be like the Gentiles. You are to serve one another. They're not listening. They don't want to listen. They're upset. They have reason to be upset at each other. They're looking at James and John. They're a little suspicious. Don't understand why all of a sudden there's this need to isolate themselves and elevate themselves above the rest. And what is amazing is that what gets their attention is something that Jesus doesn't say. What gets their attention is something that Jesus decides to initiate, and he does. And he decides perhaps what will rise above the deafening noise of the silence and the disconnect will be reconnecting with an act of love. An act of love. In John chapter 13, verse 1, it says, "Now, before the feast of the Passover, Jesus, knowing that his hour had come, that he would depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, the devil, having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come forth from God, and was going back to God, got up from supper, and laid aside his garments, and taking a towel, he girded himself." And he doesn't speak. He doesn't teach. He does. In verse 5, it says, "Then he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded." It was if the sudden silent action, the silent decision of Jesus. So no more talking, no more asking, no more, "Do I have your attention?" He just does it. And what almost seems to be happening is, before their very eyes, it's as if the presence of Jesus is like that crane that comes down and starts moving pieces that need to be maneuvered. That in their minds, they are at a standstill. They don't know how to get past this place where they're frustrated, suspicious, not wanting to communicate. And all of a sudden that starts to change. He just initiates a kind act of startling, unexpected love. He decides, I'm just going to do something here that's going to get the attention of everyone in the room. And in verse 6 it says, "So he came to Simon Peter, and he said to him, 'Lord, do you wash my feet?' And Jesus answered and said to him, what I do you do not realize now, but you will understand hereafter. Peter said to him, never shall you wash my feet. And Jesus answered him, if I do not wash you, you have no part with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, then wash not only my feet, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, he who is bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not all of you. For he who knew the one who was betraying him, for this reason he said, not all of you are clean. Sometimes there's nothing more that really can be said. Sometimes the disconnect is so strong, and the misunderstanding and all the other things that have made the bridges even that much more distant, it just seems like words. It's just too far. But actions. A surprising kind of arrival of something that was not asked for, that no one else even expected. And Jesus starts to break the gap and starts slowly, and we're going to see as the communication begins to go, starts slowly putting things closer together. John talks about this in his epistle in 1 John chapter 3. Turn to 1 John chapter 3. John even tells us sometimes to establish love, to maybe reestablish a connection that's beginning to crumble or starting to be not as strong or reliable, can only be mended with an action. It's an action. Something that we can do, that we can insert ourselves without words, without explanation, without preceding it with, by the way, since this blah, 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 I'm going to da-da-da-da-da. Sometimes it's the silent action of noticing, of saying, here is what we need. We need to get our attention back to what is our purpose, what is our motive, what are we truly seeking to accomplish. And families and relationships need love constantly burning. And sometimes our words, because of maybe how distant they've been or how long it's been since we really had any effective, real communication, right? It just gets almost harder. And right, we have those moments. Should I initiate? Should I say something? Maybe one individual has the attention to really get down into the nitty-gritty, the deep roots of what the problem is, and maybe the others, they're not recognizing, it just kind of goes past them. They're just, oh, okay, I hear you. I'll think about that. I'll get back to you. And sometimes we get to the point where we just stop trying. We wonder, what can be left? Silent, renewed acts of love is a language we all can speak that has the ability to start a spark, to get the fire of what brings the warmth and the connection of making love be seen again. And it's amazing because in our busyness and in our isolated state, sometimes we miss this, and I think Satan capitalizes it and just convinces us, that nothing can be done. We just have to find a way around these gaps and build our own structure so that we don't get caught in the holes and fall through. But there is something that can be done, and John speaks of this in 1 John chapter 3. In 1 John chapter 3, beginning in verse 13, he says, do not be surprised, brethren, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed out of death into life, because we love the brethren. He who does not love abides in death. He's talking about how important brotherhood is, and important the spiritual fellowship of the Christian family is. How precious it is, how vital it is. Why? Because he says, the world hates you. It's cold out there. It's lonely out there. It's isolated. It's even more isolated out there. The more we need a sense of family and unity and togetherness And we recognize, well, how do I keep that going when I'm just so busy? And that's all it takes. It's the busyness of life. It comes in, it creeps in, and it just pushes, and it makes these structures start coming down. And then we begin to wonder, how on earth do I repair it? And it gets back to the basics. Love. Love. Maybe starting with just noticing something small. Doesn't even have to be. You know, think about what was there anything big about washing the feet of somebody in the room? Think about how even insignificant that is. But to the disciples, this is huge. This is blowing them away. Why? Because it was unexpected. It was something that was way more than they should have received. And they think it's beneath them. Isn't it amazing how just attacking those three issues, we can all of a sudden humble ourselves, lower ourselves, serve with an act of unexpected love, all of a sudden can start mending bridges. He says, so don't be surprised, brethren, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed out of death into life because we love the brethren. He who does not love abides in death. Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer, destroys bridges, casualties happen. The person who becomes distant and isolated from our brethren is only making those gaps that much wider and making it more and more treacherous to make the passage safely. He says, how do we keep our bridges connected? How do we make sure they stay intact? He says, love not in word, but in deed and in truth. Just love. I mean, I can rekindle it, I can refresh it, I can renew it, I can come back to it. Yes. Yes. And that's what Jesus is doing. So notice he says in verse 15, everyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. But whoever has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him? Little children, let us not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and truth. When words are getting hard to come by, and the misunderstanding is only adding more to the problem, and we feel even more isolated, come back to this. Recognizing maybe a mess that you didn't make. Let me help. Let me just, no words. I'll start wiping the counter. Seeing maybe in the busy moment of someone putting things here and there, maybe the purse is there, maybe the keys get tossed there. The jacket gets flung off in a hurry to get off to the chores outside and inside the house. The simple act of hang that coat up. Put the keys, put them on, we go in the dish. I'll pick up. My wife left her purse. I know she usually looks, on that counter, so I'll put it right there so she knows to look for it. Isn't it amazing how it really doesn't take a lot? In our minds, it thinks because it's so big, it's going to take this crane's going to have to come out and start moving stuff and dig it, and I can only see so far. It's murky down here. That's that bridge. Yeah, that bridge is going to take a lot of work to get that thing done. Jesus covers so much ground by just doing something simple, by saying, I notice, I see, I recognize, and I'm going to do something about it. I'm sure your feet could feel much more comfortable if they were clean. And this gets their attention. So we go back to John chapter 13 and this amazing moment, this silent moment. But it's startling, and it's making waves, and it's causing even people to speak up and say something and comment about it. And verse 10, Jesus said to him, he who has bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not all of you. For he knew the one who was betraying him. For this reason he said, not all of you are clean. So when he had washed their feet and taken his garments and reclined at the table again, he said to them, do you know what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, the Lord and the teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. When there are no words, when we feel more disconnected than ever, wash someone's feet. Something simple, something unexpected that you weren't asked to do, but you saw you could do. And all of a sudden, what? You took the time and you did that? And they're noticing, and they're talking, and they're communicating, and they're open now. And Jesus capitalizes on this moment. Now we're going to try to bring you all together. Start to come together. Now he starts talking about this. He says in verse 13, you call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, the Lord and the teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. He said, did you see how I started bridging the gap? He said, that's how you do it. I'm showing you how you fix this stuff. He said, I see it. We're a disconnected bunch. I'm trying to manage this and trying to manage that. I'm trying to see to that. And even Jesus is like, there's just too much. There's not enough words. So let me do something. And let my action interrupt and redirect and let us refocus. That's what I wanted to communicate. I want to communicate, remember our love. Remember our commitment. Remember our devotion to love. And in verse 15 he says, for I gave you an example that you also should do as I did to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, nor is one who is sent greater than the one who sent him. Does this ring a bell? He said this in Mark chapter 10. And it went, all of a sudden, now he knows, I think you might be willing to listen. That action changed everything. He sees, I just got to do something. Let's do this. And now they're looking, they're listening, they're wondering, they're willing. He says, remember, a slave is not greater than his master, nor is the one who is sent greater than the one who sent him. For if you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. The greatest of love is simply unexplained, unrequested acts of kindness and humility. Love. And he says in verse 18, I do not speak of all of you. I know the ones I've chosen, but it is that the scripture may be fulfilled. He who eats my bread has lifted up his heel against me. From now on, I am telling you before it comes to pass, so that when it does occur, you may believe that I am he. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who receives whomever I send receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. Now all of a sudden there's dependency. He's addressing all these bridges in one fell swoop. Got them listening to communicate. I've got them recognizing that there's a little bit of understanding that he does this because he loves, and they are recipients of his love, and this love is what's keeping us together. And now he's mending the sense of dependency. You need each other. And then the next thing that begins to steamroll after this, the best thing we can possibly do after this is for us to, how do we mend the bridge of then dependency? No longer feeling isolated. What do we do? What do we do when all of a sudden we break the silence with an unexpected act of kindness and love? We go back to this. He says, watch, don't you notice what I did? isn't this drawing your attention? Aren't you focusing and aren't you recognizing how much good and how much accomplishment has come just from a simple act of love? And what he's telling them is there's so much more I can show you, and I'm willing to show you, and it will only help you stay even closer together as a group. And so don't just let it end with the act of love. Don't let it end. Don't even say anything. It would be a great next conversation starter. Hey, who put my jacket up? Why? I wanted to wash your feet. Wash. Remember when Jesus did that? I started thinking about that. And imagine how the conversation, he wants them to focus on that it will be a teaching moment for them to also question what are the things in Jesus' amazing wisdom. He got us back together by this, and he in his wisdom and his love and his understanding. And there's so much more he has to offer if we just start talking about him. That's a conversation we can have together. Still not ready to have that conversation about, well, what are the kids going to do this Saturday night, and whose house are they going to stay in, and are they going to have enough time when school starts on Monday, and this and that, and all those things. We're on different places and different stages, and we're having a hard time coming together. Let's go back and have a conversation about this. Why did you? That was pretty nice. Yeah, Jesus knows that works. And he says, I want you to do it. Yes, let me be what disrupts all that and just talk. Let me talk to you. You can have a conversation together. Turn over to John chapter 15, and he emphasizes this. In John chapter 15, that's what he's speaking about. He's saying, you want to have the ultimate conversation starter? You want to have the ultimate bridge building experience? Talk about two people connected as branches together to the true vine. And talk about that. John chapter 15, verse 1. He says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it so that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. You know what Jesus reestablishes? He reestablishes that we are foolishly and ill-equipped to repair anything by ourselves. We need Jesus. That's why he said, let me show you how you can do this. And when we recognize that when it works and when it does get the thing moving, all it should inspire us to say, how much more do we need Jesus? And you know what that begins to do? When two people recognize together, you mean, I can gain more by needing Jesus, and I can gain more by needing Jesus? You know what it bridges the gap? That isolated separation where we thought we didn't need each other. When two people who think they don't need each other recognize how much they both need Jesus, Jesus starts to even bridge that gap. And that's his intention. He said, Jesus wants to interrupt all of that. You let Jesus drop that right in the middle and watch all these things start moving and start being arranged and changing and reconnecting. In other words, get his word out and let this be the uniting element that breaks away from the polarization where we're experiencing our separation. Two people coming together and trying to connect to the same bond. In verse 6, he says, of chapter 15, if anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up, and they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. In other words, what he wants when he knows there's disconnect and there's discord. You know what he wants? He wants two people to recognize how much needs to be filled in the gap, to both of them ask God for help. He wants us asking God for help. And he does. He helps us. Because what usually gets in the way is we start thinking, right, all of a sudden my ego and another's sense of pride gets wounded. When the more disconnected and individualistic we become, we sense maybe they don't need me as much, and maybe I don't. Do I need them? The answer to those questions is not our words. The answers are not our thoughts. The answer is not our assumptions. The answer is get back to let Jesus teach us how much he loves both of us and what he can fill us up with. That we both start saying we both need Jesus. And two people who begin on that path to say we both need Jesus then realize how much we need each other. Well, what has Jesus been teaching you? And what has Jesus been showing you? And communication starts happening. But that's his intention, to let him get in the middle of all this and bring us in. Bring us in. So in verse 8 he says, my Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. Just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made full. And a beautiful thing starts to happen. It's over in 1 Peter chapter 3. You know what then we can expect and almost anticipate will happen? An unexpected, surprising, reminding act of Jesus kind love. Jesus kind love. The serving kind, the humbling kind, the without speaking kind, just because. Starts getting people thinking about the way that Jesus knows how much that means and how much that makes a difference. And two people then start saying, you know what I want to know? I want to know more about how we can be filled with more acts of his love and kindness. They can bring both of us together, connected to the same vine. And it's filling both of us. And the closer each individual gets to Jesus, the closer we feel to each other. And then communication, dependency, and understanding, all of a sudden Jesus starts filling in those gaps, and he starts bending and building and reestablishing those bridges. And we get to 1 Peter chapter 3. In 1 Peter chapter 3, he says this in verse 7. He says, you husbands in the same way, live with your wives in an understanding way, as with someone weaker, since she is a woman, and show her honor, love, unasked for, unrequested, just because I want to remind you, you are loved by God, by me, by our children. We honor you. That's what Jesus communicated when he washed his feet. I love you, I honor you, I respect you. And he didn't say a single word. And he communicated. And he says, what else happens? He says, show her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. They're communicating spiritually together, prayerfully, in an understanding way, still with right issues, still with trials, still with hardships, but God is helping, and God is renewing, and God is reviving. So we simply ask the question, are there bridges that are in need of repair? Let Jesus lead. It doesn't matter who is the first. But just initiate. Someone initiate. And let communication back to God's word together, collectively, listening, talking, discussing, and praying. And all of a sudden we feel more connected than ever. If you're with us who's never obeyed the gospel of Jesus Christ, we encourage you to take advantage of the ultimate bridge that has been put in place. A great bridge has been put into position, and it's the bridge that extends from where you're sitting now all the way up to heaven. Connects you where you're sitting right now in this building all the way to heaven. And Jesus said what this bridge is. Turn to John chapter 2 or John chapter 1. John chapter 1, Jesus said in verse 51, he said, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see the heavens opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Remember when Jacob had this dream of a ladder that reached from earth all the way up to heaven? He saw angels that were able to travel from heaven to earth. A bridge allowing communication and fellowship. When Jesus says, you want that bridge? You want how to get on that bridge? You want a bridge to reconnect, to make you feel that you can touch the heavens, that you can feel associated where God sits above this earth? Jesus says, let me be the bridge. He says, I am the bridge. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. Reconnect your spiritual connection with God by letting Jesus bridge the gap. He died on a cross to enable this opportunity for all of us to be reconnected back to God through Jesus. He died, he was buried, and he was resurrected. And he taught his disciples when he came back from the dead and said, teach the gospel to every living creature all throughout the world. He who believes and is baptized will be saved, will be reconnected to God through the love and through the blood of Jesus. And if anyone is here who wants to be reconnected, get back, let God redirect you. Won't you do that? Won't you come and confess that you believe Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and repenting of your sin, be baptized in water to rise up to walk in newness of life? And if you're ready for that, we're here to help you with that. While you come to the front, we'll gladly serve you while we stand and sing the song of encouragement together.